In an era when women were discouraged from studying science and mathematics, Ada Lovelace defied expectations and etched her name into history as the world's first computer programmer. Born the daughter of the famous poet Lord Byron, Ada combined logic and creativity in a way that no one had imagined before. Her visionary notes on Charles Babbage's analytical engine laid the foundation for what we now recognize as computer science. This is the extraordinary story of a brilliant woman who saw the future of machines long before the world caught up a tale of intellect, imagination, and enduring legacy. Part 1. A Child of Genius and Destiny. The Birth of a Legacy. In the heart of Regency London, on the 10th of December, 1815, a child was born into a world of contrasting extremes, a world where reason and emotion, poetry and precision, logic and longing, collided in the most unpredictable ways. That child was Augusta Ada Byron, later known to the world as Ada Lovelace. The only legitimate daughter of the infamous Romantic poet, Lord George Gordon Byron, and the highly educated Lady Anne Isabella Milbanke, Ada was destined from birth to live at the confluence of poetry and mathematics, of artistic spirit and analytic clarity. Her father, Lord Byron, had a mind for metaphors and a heart full of rebellion. Her mother, nicknamed by Byron himself as the Princess of Parallelograms, possessed a passion for numbers, logic, and rational thought. But Ada's life would not be one of parental harmony. Just 1 month after her birth, her mother separated from Lord Byron, taking Ada with her. It would be the last time Ada ever saw her father. A childhood of calculation. Lady Byron was determined to shield Ada from what she considered the dangerous emotional volatility of the poetic mind. She orchestrated Ada's education to emphasize logic, mathematics, and science. No fairy tales, no romantic novels, only the hard truths of geometry and arithmetic. At an age when most girls of the aristocracy were learning embroidery and etiquette, Ada was grappling with Euclid and algebra. She had private tutors, some of the finest mathematicians of the time, and she showed a deep, almost instinctive understanding of abstract concepts. But Ada was no ordinary student. In the quiet hours between lessons, she would sketch elaborate flying machines in her notebook, write speculative essays about the nature of light and sound, and dream of mechanical horses and steam-powered wings. Her mind, though trained in discipline, pulsed with invention. As early as age 12, Ada wrote an illustrated project titled Flyology, in which she tried to construct a set of wings that could lift human flight into the realm of possibility. She combined scientific principles with boundless imagination, foreshadowing the core trait that would later define her legacy, the ability to unite poetic vision with mathematical thought, mentors and inspiration. The early 1832 in England were a golden time for science. The Industrial Revolution was in full swing, and scientific societies buzzed with ideas that promised to reshape the world. And into this world stepped Ada Lovelace, young, curious, and eager. One of the first great minds to recognize her genius was Mary Somerville, a respected scientist and one of the first female members of the Royal Astronomical Society. Somerville became both a mentor and a role model for Ada, introducing her to the intellectual circles of London. Through Somerville, Ada encountered the brilliant mathematician and inventor Charles Babbage, the so-called father of the computer. He was working on a machine he called the difference engine, designed to perform polynomial calculations automatically. When Ada visited his home in 1833 and saw a prototype, she was mesmerized. While others merely saw a sophisticated calculator, Ada saw something far greater. She glimpsed the potential for machines to think, not just to compute numbers, but to process symbols, concepts, and logic. This moment planted a seed that would grow into her most important work. Babbage, too, was struck by Ada's mind. She wasn't just a noblewoman dabbling in science. She understood his ideas sometimes more deeply than his own colleagues did. A partnership was born, the marriage of Ada. In 1835, Ada married William King, who would later become the Earl of Lovelace, making Ada the Countess of Lovelace. She bore 3 children, Byron, Annabella, and Ralph, but she never allowed motherhood to suppress her intellectual drive. Even while managing her household and attending royal functions, Ada continued to correspond with scientists, read academic papers, and explore advanced mathematics under tutors like Augustus de Morgan, one of the era's foremost logicians. De Morgan, in his letters, often expressed amazement and sometimes mild concern at her intellect. He remarked that she possessed a mind capable of becoming an original mathematical investigator, perhaps of first-rate eminence. To many, this might have been surprising. In Victorian England, women were not encouraged, much less expected to contribute meaningfully to scientific discourse. Yet Ada pressed on, undeterred by societal expectations. She saw herself not just as a student of math, but as an interpreter of science, capable of translating raw mechanics into meaningful ideas. The analytical engine appears. By the late 1832nd, Charles Babbage had moved beyond the difference engine and conceived a far more ambitious machine, the analytical engine. This was no mere calculator. It was a general-purpose, programmable device capable of handling loops, conditional branching, memory storage, and arithmetic operations. In 1842, the Italian engineer Luigi Federico Menabrea wrote a paper in French describing the analytical engine based on Babbage's lectures in Turin. Babbage asked Ada to translate the paper into English for publication in an academic journal. But Ada didn't merely translate. Over the course of 9 months, she added a series of extensive annotations called simply notes. These notes, totaling more than twice the length of Menabrea's original paper, would cement her place in history. The creation of the first program. In her famous Note G, Ada described a step-by-step method by which the analytical engine could calculate Bernoulli numbers, a complex sequence important in number theory. This was not just theory. This was an actual program, a series of instructions that a machine could follow to perform a specific task. It was, in essence, the first computer algorithm written over 100 years before the first modern computer came into being. In writing this, Ada Lovelace became the world's first computer programmer. But she went even further. Ada understood that the analytical engine had capabilities beyond mathematics. She speculated that, given the right inputs and programming, it could be used to create music, compose graphics, or manipulate symbols, an idea that eerily presaged modern multimedia computing. Where Babbage saw mechanics, Ada saw meaning. She saw the soul of a machine, a mind too bright for its time. By the time Ada's notes were published in 1843 under her initials AAL, she was only 27 years old. The publication was met with admiration in scientific circles, though its true significance would not be understood until decades later. In the years that followed, Ada continued to seek intellectual fulfillment. She dabbled in fields as varied as calculus, neurobiology, and philosophy. She even dreamed of creating a mathematical model for how the human brain gives rise to thought, a pursuit that anticipated the birth of artificial intelligence. But her health began to fail. In 1852, at the age of 36, Ada died of uterine cancer, the same age her father, Lord Byron, had been when he passed away. Per her request, she was buried next to him at the Church of St. Mary Magdalene in Hucknall, Nottinghamshire. The daughter he never knew in life returned to him in death. Ada Lovelace's childhood was not just an upbringing, it was a crucible. Forged in the fire of her parents' opposing legacies, she emerged not as a copy of either, but as something wholly new. She was a woman of paradox, emotional and rational, intuitive and analytical, poetic and scientific, and in a world not yet ready to understand her, she wrote the language that future generations would one day speak, the language of computers. Part 2. Annotating the Machine, the Making of the First Algorithm. In the early 1842, Charles Babbage's ambitious analytical engine had become a subject of fascination across Europe. Among the few who grasped its potential was a young Italian engineer and military officer named Luigi Federico Menabrea, who attended one of Babbage's lectures in Turin. Intrigued by Babbage's machine, Menabrea composed a paper in French detailing the principles of the analytical engine. The work was impressive, but lacked depth in envisioning the broader implications. When the English scientific journal Scientific Memoirs expressed interest in publishing an English translation, Babbage turned to one person. He chose Ada Lovelace, the only individual he trusted, to not only understand the machine's logic, but also convey it with imagination and precision. Ada accepted, but she would do far more than translate. The notes begin. What began as a simple translation soon evolved into something revolutionary. Over 9 months in 1842, 1843, Ada poured herself into the project. The result was a body of 7 notes labeled A through G. Each note represented a different layer of insight, moving from mechanical explanation to philosophical speculation. They were longer than Menabrea's original paper and far more visionary. Ada wrote not as a passive observer, but as an architect of thought. She questioned assumptions, clarified ambiguities, and most notably, she wrote a detailed set of instructions by which the analytical engine could compute Bernoulli numbers. This wasn't just commentary. It was the first published algorithm intended to be executed by a machine. Note A. Introduction. In Note A, Ada begins by explaining the nature of the analytical engine in lay terms. She clarifies that the machine, unlike calculators or difference engines, was general purpose, capable of solving any problem expressed in numbers, given the right programming. She writes, "The analytical engine does not occupy common ground with mere calculating machines. It holds a position wholly its own." Here, Ada separates the analytical engine from its predecessors. She hints at the programmable nature of the machine, marking the first step toward modern computing architecture. Note B. Mathematical representations. In Note B, Ada dives into symbolic representation. She explains how the engine uses punched cards to represent operations, and data drawing parallels with the loom cards of Joseph-Marie Jacquard used to weave complex textile patterns. This comparison is crucial. It illustrates how a mechanical system can follow symbolic patterns, not just numbers, but instructions. Ada saw the connection. Just as looms could weave intricate designs from a pattern, so too could a machine weave algebraic patterns. A poetic metaphor and a foundational insight in computer science. Note C. Memory and storage. Note C reveals Ada's understanding of data, storage, and memory. She writes about how the engine can store numbers and recall them as needed, using mechanical components that correspond to what we now call RAM and registers. Ada explains that the machine can hold intermediate results, retrieve them later, and use them in conditional operations. It was an early blueprint for memory management in programming. She recognized the importance of temporary memory, essential for loops, recursion, and multi-step calculations. Note D. Branching and loops. In Note D, Ada tackles decision-making logic, the heart of modern programming. She discusses how the engine could be directed to choose different operations based on conditions, what we today call conditional branching. She also anticipates looping, repeating a series of steps based on a logical condition. While she doesn't use modern terms like if, then, or while, the concepts are clearly there. These are not simple calculations. These are programmable control structures, decades ahead of their time. Note E. symbolic manipulation. Note E is where Ada begins to distinguish computation from mechanical calculation. She discusses how symbols could be manipulated independently of their numeric value. In other words, the machine didn't need to know what a number meant, it only needed to follow a rule for handling it. This separation between syntax and semantics is fundamental in modern computer science. She writes, "The science of operations, as derived from mathematics more especially, is a science of itself, and has its own abstract truth and value." In this sentence, Ada lays the groundwork for computer science as an autonomous field, distinct from pure mathematics or mechanical engineering. Note F, interpretation and logic. In Note F, Ada begins to speculate. What if machines could operate on non-numeric data? What if they could represent logic, relationships, even conceptual structures? She doesn't claim the analytical engine can do this yet, but she plants the idea that machines could manipulate logic itself. Here we see the faint glimmer of artificial intelligence, a machine that reasons, not just calculates. Note G, the first algorithm. Note G is the crown jewel. Here, Ada lays out a complete, step-by-step method for calculating Bernoulli numbers. She creates a table of operations, inputs, outputs, and transitions between them like a computer program. She anticipates input validation, operation sequencing, intermediate storage, looping logic, output formatting. This was no mere speculation. It was a working model of a real computation using programmable logic. Although Babbage never built the full analytical engine, modern engineers have simulated Ada's algorithm on hypothetical models of it. It works. This is the birth of programming. Beyond mathematics, Ada's vision. In the final passages of Note G, Ada lets her imagination soar. She writes, "The analytical engine might act upon other things besides numbers. The engine might compose elaborate and scientific pieces of music of any degree of complexity or extent." Here, Ada breaks from Babbage's vision. Where he saw a tool for calculation, Ada foresaw a universal machine capable of processing any symbolic system, including music, art, language, and beyond. This was Turing's vision, a full century early. She had, in effect, predicted the concept of a general-purpose computer. Reception and legacy of the notes. When her notes were published in 1843, they were credited only to AAL. The public was impressed, but did not grasp the magnitude of what had occurred. The true genius of the notes would only be understood in the 20th century as digital computing became a reality. Ada's insights were rediscovered, revered, and reclaimed by computer scientists and historians. She had seen what even Babbage had missed. She didn't just document the engine, she gave it philosophical life. Babbage's acknowledgement. Charles Babbage himself once wrote, "Forget this world and all its troubles, and if possible its multitudinous charlatans, everything in short but the enchantress of numbers." He knew Ada's role was pivotal. She had translated not just words, but ideas. She had taken an invention and given it a soul. The notes of Ada Lovelace did more than interpret a machine. They imagined a future. They laid the foundations of programming, logic processing, and symbolic computation. They foreshadowed machine learning, artificial intelligence, and multimedia computing. Ada did not merely work with numbers, she conversed with them. She didn't program machines to compute, she programmed them to think. In doing so, she became not just the first programmer, but the first dreamer of what computing could become. Part 3. The enchantress of numbers, personality, genius, and struggles, the woman behind the vision. While Ada Lovelace is widely remembered for her work with the analytical engine, behind her achievements lay a woman of depth, contrast, and complexity. She was not a mere vessel for logic or a passionless intellect. She was animated, intense, ambitious, eccentric, and at times deeply conflicted. To understand Ada's enduring legacy, we must explore not just her brilliance, but her personality, that volatile blend of romantic passion and scientific discipline forged in the fire of her unique upbringing. Dual inheritance. Ada was the product of two opposing worlds. Her father, Lord Byron, embodied unrestrained passion, poetry, and rebellion. Her mother, Lady Byron, represented cold rationality, duty, and mathematics. From this duality emerged a woman with a mind ruled by reason, but fueled by imagination. Ada once wrote, "That brain of mine is something more than merely mortal, as time will show." She believed in the transcendence of intellect, in the power of the human mind to unite poetry with numbers, emotion with structure. It's no surprise that Ada referred to herself as an analyst and metaphysician. Obsessive curiosity. Ada's mind was rarely still. From a young age, she exhibited signs of obsessive intellectual curiosity. Her notebooks were filled not only with equations but with metaphysical ruminations, observations of nature, theories on thought, and dreams of mechanical birds. She didn't study math to pass exams or earn praise. She pursued it because she believed it offered a glimpse into universal truth. She once wrote, "I am not in a hurry. I do not expect to be famous in my own life, but I would be recognized in posterity." Her ambition was timeless. Her gaze was not fixed on her own century, but on the future. A mind that pushed limits. Ada's tutors, including Augustus de Morgan, frequently noted her intensity. In his letters, de Morgan expressed awe at her capabilities and concern for her well-being. Her mind moved quickly, perhaps too quickly, toward abstraction. She often wrestled with mental fatigue and overstimulation. Ada suffered frequent migraines and emotional crashes, which sometimes left her bedridden for days. But even through physical pain, she continued her studies, writing, "That which I was born to do, I must, despite illness and opposition." She viewed her intellect as a divine instrument, a purpose not merely academic but spiritual. Love of abstraction and metaphor. Unlike most mathematicians of her day, Ada used metaphor freely and powerfully. She described algorithms as algebraic patterns woven by the engine. She compared mathematical truths to music and computation to poetic rhythm. In her letters, she would shift effortlessly between discussing calculus and philosophy, between writing equations and lyrical metaphors. To Ada, mathematics was not cold. It was creative. It was alive. The gambler's heart. Despite her analytic gifts, Ada had a reckless streak. She loved risk, particularly in the form of gambling. In the 1842nd, she became involved with a small group of aristocrats who engaged in high-stakes betting schemes, including a now infamous effort to create a mathematical model for betting on horse races. Ada believed she could use probability theory to outsmart the bookmakers, an early attempt at what we might now call algorithmic prediction. But it ended poorly. She lost large sums of money, possibly tens of thousands of pounds by modern standards. The scandal was covered up by friends and family, but it revealed another side of Ada, a mind that hungered for proof, yet thrilled in chaos. Romanticism and vision. Though her marriage to Lord Lovelace was one of mutual respect, Ada harbored deep romantic longings throughout her life. She corresponded with several male intellectuals, and some letters suggest emotionally intense, possibly inappropriate relationships. Her correspondence with Babbage, for instance, though mostly professional, was tinged with intellectual flirtation. She called herself his fairy and the enchantress of numbers. These titles weren't just playful, they embodied Ada's view of herself as a bridge between the abstract and the real, between mysticism and mechanics. Health, morphine, and emotional turmoil. Ada's health had always been fragile, but in her 32nd, it began to decline rapidly. She suffered from uterine cancer, unbearable pain that led doctors to prescribe increasing doses of opiates, including morphine and laudanum. The drugs dulled her pain but blurred her mind. In her final years, she struggled with paranoia, hallucinations, and spiritual visions. Her correspondence became erratic. Her focus drifted from mathematics to spiritual salvation. Yet even as she faded physically, she clung to the conviction that she had contributed something the world would one day understand: relationships and regrets. In her last weeks, Ada demanded a confession. She asked for solitude with a priest. No one knows what was said, but afterward she requested to be buried beside the father she never knew, Lord Byron. It was a shocking request. Ada had spent her life distancing herself from his emotional legacy, yet in the end she sought reconciliation with that part of herself. Perhaps she saw the poet in herself. Perhaps she accepted that her vision had always been Byronic, passionate, bold, and tragic. Death of the Enchantress. Ada Lovelace died on the 27th of November, 1852, at the age of 36, the same age at which her father had died. She was buried beside Lord Byron at the Church of St. Mary Magdalene in Hucknall, Nottinghamshire. The two were finally united in death, if not in life. At the time of her passing, her mathematical works were largely forgotten. Her translation and notes on the analytical engine were known only to a handful of scientific thinkers. Her potential, so widely praised, seemed unfulfilled. But time, as Ada had predicted, would remember. The rediscovery, more than a century later, in the mid-20th century, as the digital computer era began, scholars rediscovered Ada's notes. They were stunned. Here was a woman writing in 1843 who had not only explained the principles of computing, but anticipated its philosophical and creative potential. Ada became a symbol, the world's first programmer, a pioneer of symbolic logic, and a visionary who saw the future long before it arrived. Ada Lovelace's life was not linear. It was a spiral of ideas, passions, struggles, and breakthroughs. She was not merely a footnote in Babbage's story, nor a side character in the history of computing. She was the first to articulate what a programmable machine could be. She was the enchantress of numbers, yes, but also the prophet of digital thought. In her brief life, Ada Lovelace crafted a vision that would resonate across centuries, not just in science, but in the spirit of every dreamer who dares to imagine machines that think, speak, create, and feel. Part 4. Legacy, Recognition, and the Rise of Ada in the Modern Age. A long silence. After Ada Lovelace's death in 1852, her achievements faded into obscurity. The Victorian era, with its rigid gender roles and male-dominated scientific discourse, was not ready to recognize a woman who had pioneered something too radical to be understood at the time. Her notes on the analytical engine were preserved in scientific libraries and archives, but few people read them. Charles Babbage, too, fell out of public attention. His engine never built, his dream deferred. The world had not yet caught up to Ada's vision. The computer revolution begins in the 1932nd and 42nd, the groundwork for modern computing began to take shape. Alan Turing, a brilliant British mathematician, conceived the idea of a universal machine that could perform any computation given the correct instructions, a concept that echoed Ada's writings. In the United States, Howard Aiken, John von Neumann, and Grace Hopper helped develop early computers such as the Harvard Mark I and ENIAC. It was during this era that historians and engineers stumbled upon Ada's notes again. They were astonished. One of the earliest thinkers to fully grasp what a computer could be, not just what it could calculate, was a woman who died a century earlier. Turing and the Lovelace legacy. Though Ada Lovelace and Alan Turing never lived in the same century, their ideas are often compared. Turing once wrote, "The analytical engine has no pretensions to originate anything. It can do whatever we know how to order it to perform." He was paraphrasing Ada Lovelace's Note G, in which she said, "The analytical engine has no pretensions whatever to originate anything. It can do whatever we know how to order it to perform." But where some interpreted this as Ada limiting the power of computers, others, especially in the 20th century, saw it differently. She was highlighting the role of the human programmer. Creativity came from the mind that commanded the machine. This realization elevated Ada's place in computing history, not just as a translator or commentator, but as the first true programmer. Ada's resurgence in the 1982nd witnessed a surge in efforts to recognize the forgotten contributions of women in science. At the forefront of this was the push to acknowledge Ada Lovelace as the world's first computer programmer. Scholars, feminist historians, and technologists championed her legacy. Her story began appearing in textbooks, university curricula, and academic journals. She became an icon of inclusion, a powerful counterpoint to the stereotype that computing was a man's field. In 1980, the U.S. Department of Defense named a programming language after her, the ADA programming language. Designed for mission-critical systems in military and aerospace engineering, the ADA language was both a tribute and a milestone. Ada Lovelace had officially entered the world she had once only imagined. Ada Lovelace Day. In 2009, British technologist Sue Charman-Anderson founded Ada Lovelace Day, a global celebration of the achievements of women in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, STEM. Held every second Tuesday in October, Ada Lovelace Day includes events, lectures, social media campaigns, and outreach programs dedicated to inspiring young girls to pursue careers in tech and science. It isn't just about Ada's historical importance, it's about what she represents, the power of imagination in science, the necessity of inclusion, the importance of recognizing pioneers, even long after they're gone, museums, art, and modern culture. Today, Ada Lovelace's legacy is felt far beyond academia. Her face appears in paintings, murals, and digital art. Her name graces buildings, lecture halls, and research institutes. Plays, operas, and films have dramatized her life, focusing on her struggle between intellect and illness, duty and vision. In 2015, the Science Museum in London held an exhibition titled Ada Lovelace, The Making of a Computer Scientist. It showcased her papers, letters, and personal effects, including the famous Note G. Ada became a symbol not only of brilliance, but of the under-recognized genius whose time had finally arrived. Ada in pop culture. Ada's influence extends into popular culture. She has appeared as a character in Doctor Who, The Frankenstein Chronicles, and The Thrilling Adventures of Lovelace and Babbage. She's featured in countless documentaries, YouTube series, and biographies. Ada is now portrayed as a cyberpunk visionary, a heroine of code, a steampunk mathematician with dreams of AI before AI existed. These depictions, though dramatized, capture the essence of her unconventional mind and ahead of its time imagination. The debate over first programmer. Some historians have questioned whether Ada truly deserves the title of first programmer. After all, Babbage had drafted sample programs before her, but defenders argue that Ada's program was the first published algorithm specifically designed for execution by a machine. Her notes were not just technical, but conceptual. They envisioned what programming could become. She publicly framed the role of the programmer, distinguishing between hardware and software, execution, and creativity. In this sense, Ada wasn't just writing instructions, she was defining a new intellectual discipline, Ada and the future of tech. In an age where AI, machine learning, quantum computing, and symbolic logic shape our digital lives, Ada's ideas have never felt more relevant. She believed that machines could one day compose music, generate images, analyze language, and simulate intelligence not as tools but as collaborators. Modern developments such as ChatGPT, AI composers, and code generation models echo Ada's vision of creative computing. She saw it all, not in circuit boards or silicon, but in the theoretical gears and levers of an imagined machine. A lasting influence on women in STEM. Ada Lovelace's name is now invoked to inspire and empower. Programs around the world, especially those focused on bridging the gender gap in tech, use her story as a beacon. Organizations like Girls Who Code, Ada Developers Academy, the Ada Initiative are keeping her spirit alive by supporting women and marginalized communities in the digital age. To them, Ada is more than a historical figure. She's a starting point proof that women have always been at the heart of innovation, even when the world refused to see them. Ada Lovelace was not celebrated in her lifetime, but today she is remembered not as an assistant to Babbage, but as a founder of modern computing thought. Her legacy reminds us that true innovation doesn't always arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it comes in the form of annotated notes, poetic metaphors, and quiet conviction. And though her body rests beside the poet who gave her life, it is her mind that continues to live on in every line of code, every algorithm, every dream of intelligent machines. She was Ada. She is Ada, the enchantress of numbers who whispered to the future, and the future answered. Part Symph. Ada's enduring impact in the digital age and the philosophy of computing, a legacy that transcends time. What makes a legacy endure? Is it measured in monuments, citations, or statues? Or is it felt in the ideas that ripple through generations, subtly, quietly, changing how the world thinks? For Ada Lovelace, her legacy was not just about being the first programmer. It was about the vision, the understanding that machines could do more than crunch numbers. They could become extensions of human thought. In the digital age, her legacy has blossomed far beyond the world of steam and gears she knew. Her spirit now lives in algorithms, code, artificial intelligence, and even the ethics of computing. Ada and artificial intelligence. Ada Lovelace once said, "The analytical engine weaves algebraic patterns, just as the jacquard loom weaves flowers and leaves." She imagined machines capable of creating music, producing images, and even making decisions, not because they understood these things as humans do, but because they could manipulate symbols and relationships. Today, her ideas echo in the world of AI. Neural networks imitate human learning. Generative models create poetry, art, and music. Language models carry on conversations, interpret text, and respond with meaning. Ada envisioned these possibilities 180 years ago. Not bad for a woman with no formal scientific education, no access to university, and no place in the Royal Society. Symbolic, logic, and Lovelace's intellectual framework. Lovelace's notes display a remarkable grasp of symbolic reasoning, which today lies at the heart of modern logic, programming languages, and computational theory. She understood that machines did not require consciousness to perform sophisticated tasks. They merely needed rules, well-defined operations, mapped in symbolic form. In many ways, her approach predated the work of thinkers like Bertrand Russell, Alfred North Whitehead, Kurt Gödel, Claude Shannon. They would later formalize the relationship between logic and mathematics that Ada had intuitively explored. Her vision was philosophical. She saw machines as tools for amplifying the intellect, not replacing it. Creativity and computation, Ada's great insight. One of Lovelace's most prophetic insights was that machines could one day be creative. This idea was controversial even in the 20th century. Critics of artificial intelligence often cited the Lovelace objection, paraphrased as, "Computers can only do what we tell them. They cannot originate anything truly new." But modern AI has challenged this view. AI-generated art sells in galleries. AI-written poems win awards. AI music compositions receive critical acclaim. The line between generation and creativity is blurring. Was Ada wrong? Or did she mean something deeper, that originality is not divine, but the result of complex pattern making, a process machines can mimic? Ada's influence on feminist tech philosophy. Narration. Ada's life has also become a lens through which scholars examine gender in science and technology. Her erasure from history reflects broader patterns. Women invent, discover, and code, but their contributions are sidelined. Female genius is often reframed as support or assistantship. Feminist philosophers like Donna Haraway and Judy Wajcman have invoked Ada as a symbol of resistance, a woman who dared to define a new field and was nearly lost to time. Her recovery by feminist historians was not just about recognition, it was a reclamation of space in science for women's intellect, voice, and imagination. Ada Lovelace and the Ethics of Computation. As we build ever more complex algorithms to power social media, healthcare, finance, and defense, ethical concerns loom large. What should machines be allowed to decide? Who bears responsibility when algorithms harm? Can AI systems reflect bias? Should we limit machine autonomy? Though these weren't Ada's questions, her writings encourage us to think deeply about the interface between human and machine. She framed the analytical engine not as a replacement for human intelligence, but as a partner to it, a subtle but critical distinction. Ada's view implies responsibility not just for what machines do, but for what we ask them to do. The revival of human-centered technology. In an age obsessed with efficiency and automation, Ada's legacy offers something essential: human-centered computation. She believed machines should reflect human imagination. Programming is a creative act. The future of science must be shaped by poetry as well as precision. Modern movements in design, such as humane tech, ethical AI, and slow computing, carry the torch of Lovelace's philosophy. They ask not only what can be done with machines, but why. The Lovelace-Babbage legacy in the age of cloud and quantum. Today, we live in a world Ada and Babbage could never have physically imagined, but they helped conceptually birth. Cloud computing distributes processing across the globe. Quantum computing defies classical logic, allowing particles to exist in superpositions performing simultaneous calculations. Machine learning iteratively improves itself based on data, drawing inspiration from statistical patterns Ada herself mused on. The lineage from analytical engine to modern cloud platforms is not technical, but philosophical. It's about the way we see machines not just as tools, but as platforms for thought. Lovelace helped shape that worldview, a name that echoes. Today, Ada's name is echoed across the tech landscape. Ada Initiative, Advocacy for Women in Open Tech, Ada Developers Academy, Inclusive Software Training, Ada Lovelace Institute, Research in Ethics of Data and AI, Ada Awards, recognizing women leaders in STEM fields. To many, Ada is no longer just a name, it's a movement, a standard, and a symbol. The future through Ada's eyes. If Ada Lovelace were alive today, what might she think? She might marvel at our phones, laugh at the massive data centers, or weep at the lack of empathy in some digital systems. But most of all, she would likely feel vindicated. Her dreams of symbolic engines and poetic machines are real. Her conviction that imagination belongs in science has proven true. Ada Lovelace saw a future where machines could simulate intelligence and amplify the human spirit. That future is now. Lovelace's legacy is no longer confined to the pages of Victorian manuscripts. It pulses in algorithms, echoes in debates on AI ethics, and flickers on screens across the globe. She foresaw not only the machine, but the mind behind it. Not only the equation, but the meaning behind it. In her union of art and arithmetic, Ada Lovelace gifted us a vision that continues to grow. And as the world becomes ever more digital, her words remain a beacon. That brain of mine is more than merely mortal, as time will show. Part 6. A full timeline of Ada's life, work, and posthumous influence. Ada Lovelace's life may have spanned only 36 years, but the impact of those years echoes across centuries. By assembling a chronological timeline, we understand how her mind developed step by step, what cultural and scientific forces influenced her, when her work intersected with history, and how her rediscovery evolved over time. This is not just a biography, it's a map of an intellectual revolution. The 10th of December, 1815, Augusta. Ada Byron is born in London to Lord George Gordon Byron, the famous Romantic poet, and Lady Anne Isabella Milbanke Byron, a brilliant mathematician. January 1816, Lord Byron leaves the family shortly after Ada's birth. She never sees him again. April 1816, Lord Byron departs England and eventually dies in Greece in 1824. 1822, Lady Byron oversees Ada's strict education in logic, mathematics, and science, hoping to suppress any poetic madness inherited from her father. 1828, age 12. Ada designs a flying machine inspired by birds, complete with annotated diagrams and wing mechanics. 1833, age 17. Ada meets Charles Babbage at a party hosted by polymath Mary Somerville. She sees a prototype of his difference engine and is instantly captivated. 1834 begins. Ada begins exchanging letters with Babbage, forming a powerful intellectual bond. 1835, Ada marries William King, who later becomes the Earl of Lovelace, making her the Countess of Lovelace. 1836, 1839, Ada gives birth to 3 children: Byron, 1836, Anne, 1837, and Ralph, 1839, while continuing her private mathematical studies. 1,840 Babbage lectures in Turin about his analytical engine, an abstract programmable general-purpose computer. 1,842, Luigi Menabrea publishes Babbage's Turin lectures in French. Ada is tasked with translating the document into English. 184, 3 June, August. Ada not only translates the material, but appends her own extensive notes, which are 3 times longer than the original text. Among them is Note G, which contains the first published algorithm meant for machine execution. This marks the birth of computer programming. 1844, 1845. Ada explores combining mathematics with musical composition and symbolic logic. She speculates about machines composing symphonies and processing symbols, not just numbers. 1851. Ada is diagnosed with uterine cancer. She continues correspondence with scientists, but her health deteriorates rapidly. The 27th of November, 1852, Ada Lovelace dies at age 36. She is buried next to her father, Lord Byron, in Nottinghamshire, at her request. 1852nd, 1882nd, unquote. Charles Babbage continues his work, but fails to construct the full analytical engine. Ada's work is rarely cited. 1903, Babbage's son Henry completes a small demonstration portion of the analytical engine, but Ada's name is barely mentioned. 1910-second, 1922nd interest in mechanical computation begins to fade in favor of electrical technologies. 1923 932nd, theoretical work on algorithms and symbolic logic, Turing, Gödel, Hilbert, lays the groundwork for digital computing but without reference to Ada. 1944, Howard Aiken, designer of the Harvard Mark I, becomes one of the first to reference Babbage's ideas during the rise of electromechanical computers. 1950, British computer scientist B.V. Bowden republishes Ada's 1,843 notes in the book Faster Than Thought, helping revive scholarly interest. 1953, Ada's notes are recognized as the first published algorithm written for a machine, giving her the belated title of the first computer programmer. 1979. The U.S. Department of Defense begins development of a new high-level programming language, naming it ADA in her honor. 1980. The ADA language is officially adopted as a standard by the U.S. military, symbolizing Lovelace's recognition by the global tech community. 1992nd Onjation. Feminist scholars and technology historians revisit Lovelace's contributions, publishing biographies and academic essays to reclaim her legacy. 1992. Sidney Padua creates The Thrilling Adventures of Lovelace and Babbage, a humorous webcomic that becomes widely popular and inspires a graphic novel. 2008, biographer Dorothy Stein argues, Ada's role has been overstated, sparking debate and further research into Ada's actual authorship and contributions. 2009, technologist Sue Charman Anderson founds Ada Lovelace Day, celebrated globally to promote the visibility of women in STEM. 2012, Google celebrates Ada Lovelace's birthday with a Google Doodle seen by millions worldwide. 2015, the Science Museum of London opens a major exhibition, Ada Lovelace, The Making of a Computer Scientist, showcasing her original notes and letters. 2018, the UK government names Ada Lovelace Institute, dedicated to ensuring that data and AI work for people and society. 2020, Lovelace becomes a central figure in digital inclusion campaigns and AI ethics discussions. Her face appears on T-shirts, murals, and educational posters. 2022. Numerous universities begin naming STEM scholarships after Ada, especially for underrepresented students in computer science. 2023-2025. Ada's name appears in AI software libraries, robotics conferences, and even in space research projects using autonomous code. From a quiet drawing room in Victorian England to the buzzing servers of 21st century data centers, the thread of Ada Lovelace's mind connects centuries. Her timeline is more than a chronology, it's proof that ideas born in obscurity can one day change the world. We track the milestones not only to remember where she went, but to imagine where she still might lead us. For in every computation, every algorithm, and every effort to imagine a machine that thinks, creates, or collaborates, Ada is there, always ahead of her time. Part 7. Ada's Intellectual Universe, Influences, Correspondences, and the Scientific World She Navigated. Ada's Unusual Education. While most Victorian women were taught embroidery and etiquette, Ada Lovelace was taught calculus and mechanics. Her mother, Lady Byron, dubbed the Princess of Parallelograms, was a firm believer in rational education. She wanted Ada's mind shaped by logic, not poetry, as a safeguard against her father's flamboyant temperament. Thus, Ada's early tutors included William Friend, a social reformer and mathematician, Mary Somerville, one of the most prominent scientific translators and educators of the 19th century, Augustus de Morgan, a foundational figure in formal logic. These minds guided Ada in abstract reasoning, symbolic mathematics, and philosophical rigor rare terrain for a young woman in her era. Mary Somerville, the guiding star. Mary Somerville was more than a tutor. She was a mentor, a trailblazer, and a friend. Her translation of Laplace Mécanique Céleste introduced many English readers, including Ada to Newtonian celestial mechanics. Ada admired Somerville deeply, calling her one of the few individuals I have ever known whom I might truly call great. Their correspondence was rich with intellectual curiosity. Ada often posed questions on astronomy, magnetism, and higher mathematics, which Mary answered patiently and encouragingly. In Mary, Ada saw proof that a woman's mind could command the heavens. Augustus de Morgan, Logic and Doubt. Professor Augustus de Morgan, a major figure in the development of modern logic, took charge of Ada's mathematical instruction in the 1842nd. At first, he underestimated her. He questioned whether a woman could handle deep analysis. But as Ada's skill and tenacity grew, he revised his view, though not without reservations. In one letter he noted, "The very great tension of mind which Ada is capable of bearing is perhaps beyond what I have met with in any other male student." Their exchange of letters delved into complex topics, imaginary numbers, limits, differentials, and the nature of proof. Although he doubted her full grasp at times, Ada's persistence reshaped his perception of women in science. Charles Babbage, The Intellectual Partnership. No relationship shaped Ada's intellectual life more than her collaboration with Charles Babbage. Babbage, already renowned for his difference engine, was a man of genius and eccentricity. He saw potential in Ada from the first meeting. "That young lady has touched me," he wrote. "She understands my engine better than all the men put together." Together they exchanged over 2 decades' worth of letters, exploring the metaphysical implications of mechanical thinking. Their work culminated in Ada's 1843 notes, where her philosophical insight pushed Babbage's invention beyond engineering and into theoretical computing. Ada once told Babbage, "I do not wish to be famous, but I do wish to be listened to." Through their collaboration, she was. The scientific landscape of Ada's era. Ada Lovelace lived during a time of immense transformation in the scientific world. Michael Faraday was redefining electromagnetism. Charles Darwin was preparing On the Origin of Species. Mary Anning was uncovering the fossils that rewrote Earth's history. Carl Friedrich Gauss was reshaping pure mathematics. Joseph Fourier was revolutionizing heat and wave theory. In such a vibrant context, Ada's work emerged not in a vacuum, but in conversation with the cutting edge of scientific evolution. Her ability to interweave disciplines, math, logic, poetry, and technology gave her a unique voice amid a male-dominated world. Philosophy, imagination, and metaphysics. Narration. Ada's notes are sprinkled with references to metaphysics, mind-body theory, and the boundaries of human understanding. She read widely. Plato, Locke, Kant, and Pascal. She asked questions that modern scientists still grapple with. What is consciousness? Can a machine emulate the mind? Is computation a form of thought? She saw the analytical engine not just as hardware, but as a canvas for intellectual expression. She called herself a poetical scientist and believed the imagination was crucial to innovation, especially in science. Correspondence and confidence. Ada wrote letters constantly to Babbage, Somerville, De Morgan, and others. But beyond scholarly matters, they also reveal her emotional complexity and fierce self-awareness. In one letter, she declared, "That which I am, and if I am to be great, it is because I believe I am meant to be so." She was not merely intelligent, she was bold. At a time when women were discouraged from publishing, speaking, or theorizing, Ada crafted long-form mathematical commentary and signed her name publicly. Her confidence was as groundbreaking as her ideas. Ada's library and intellectual arsenal. Books were Ada's sanctuary. Her personal collection included Principles of Mechanics by Newton, Elements by Euclid, La Géométrie by Descartes, The Theory of Heat by Fourier, The Mechanism of the Heavens by Mary Somerville, early works of calculus, astronomy, and philosophy. She also annotated these volumes with marginalia, proving not only that she read them, but dialogued with them. Ada did not passively absorb knowledge, she reconstructed it. Thought experiments and scientific creativity. Ada's scientific strength lay in her ability to perform mental modeling, what we now call thought experiments. She imagined how machines could modify their own instructions, translate symbols into meanings, process musical notes, letters, and images. In essence, she foresaw the concept of software abstraction, a bridge between mechanical processes and semantic interpretation. This made her different from Babbage, who saw the analytical engine more as a calculator. Ada, by contrast, saw it as an orchestra of logic. In a world that offered her no university, no doctorate, no Royal Society membership, Ada Lovelace still constructed her own intellectual universe. Her tools? Letters, books, mentors, an unstoppable drive to think. That universe still inspires students, scientists, and creators. Because Ada's mind was not built for her time, it was built for all time. She didn't just ask what the machine could do, she asked, what could it become? Part 8, The Making of the Ada Myth, Debates, Criticism, and Modern Reappraisals. For over a century after her death in 1852, Ada Lovelace's name lay dormant. Her 1,843 notes had been buried in obscurity. Her contribution to the birth of computation had gone unrecognized. But then something changed. In the 1,952nd, Ada's notes were republished. In the 1,972nd, the feminist movement began to reclaim forgotten female pioneers. And in the 1,982nd, the U.S. Department of Defense named its new computer language Ada, sealing her symbolic return. Thus began the construction of the Ada myth, not myth in the sense of fiction, but as a powerful narrative identity of a woman far ahead of her time. Hailed as the first programmer, Ada Lovelace is often called the first computer programmer. This title is drawn from her 1,843 Note G, where she described a method for computing Bernoulli numbers using Charles Babbage's analytical engine, a feat that predated modern software by over a century. It wasn't just coding. Ada understood symbolic abstraction, predicted loops, memory, and sequential instructions, saw the potential for machines to manipulate non-numerical data. She wrote not just a program, but a theory of computing. This led scholars to elevate her as the visionary prophetess of the computer age. The critical reassessment begins. However, by the 1,992nd and 2,002nd, a wave of scholars began questioning how much Ada really contributed. Some of the most vocal critiques include Dorothy Stein, Ada, A Life and a Legacy, 1985. Argued that Babbage likely wrote the algorithm and that Ada misunderstood parts of her own notes. Bruce Collier, The Little Engine That Couldn't, 1970, claimed that Ada was a mere bystander elevated by modern idealism. Alan Bromley and others suggested that Babbage's own manuscripts contained fragments of the algorithm long before Ada's notes. These voices argued that the romanticization of Ada Lovelace was a distortion fueled by modern agendas. The defense of Ada's legacy. In response, a powerful defense arose from other historians and technologists. Betty Toole, Ada, the Enchantress of Numbers, 1992, highlighted Ada's correspondence and independent notes as evidence of her authorship and vision. Ursula Martin, Oxford professor, argued that Ada was not just a scribe but a co-thinker who brought philosophical insight that Babbage lacked. Sue Charman Anderson, founder of Ada Lovelace Day, emphasized the cultural necessity of reclaiming overlooked female contributors to STEM. Defenders did not claim Ada built the machine or invented coding in the modern sense, but that her conceptual leap toward general-purpose computing was profound and original. Parsing authorship. Who wrote what? Much of the debate comes down to authorship. Babbage originally wrote the lecture that Ada translated. Ada wrote extensive notes A.G., which include many original ideas. Note G, the most significant, contains the algorithm for calculating Bernoulli numbers. Critics argue that Ada copied from Babbage's unpublished drafts. Supporters respond that Ada added entire theoretical frameworks, including the idea of symbolic computation, the assertion that machines might one day manipulate music and language, reflections on artificial intelligence before the term existed. Even if Babbage inspired the method, Ada's notes shaped how future generations would understand and use machines. The gendered lens. At the core of the Ada debate lies a deeper question: how much of the criticism and celebration is influenced by gender bias? In Victorian times, Ada was discouraged from publishing or speaking publicly. In modern times, she is scrutinized for not being technical enough by today's standards. This contradiction raises important questions. Would we expect more from Ada than from a male counterpart in her situation? Are we applying 21st century criteria to 19th century constraints? Is her myth necessary to counterbalance the erasure of women in science? Critics and supporters alike agree. The gendered context cannot be ignored. Was Ada a genius, a symbol, or both? Let's examine the categories. 1. Genius. Ada possessed an unusual combination of mathematical rigor, literary imagination, and mechanical foresight. 2. Symbol. She represents all women whose work was overshadowed, suppressed, or denied. 3. Icon. She is now a symbol for campaigns in education, tech equity, and digital inclusion. Ada Lovelace may not have built a machine, but she helped build a new way of thinking about them. And for many, that makes her a genius in the most visionary sense. Ada in popular culture. The 21st century has seen a surge of Ada-inspired media. The thrilling adventures of Lovelace and Babbage, comic, graphic novel. Dramas like To Dream Tomorrow and Conceiving Ada, countless TED Talks, children's books, and YouTube animations. Her name on scholarships, awards, schools and university halls, even AI research labs and space missions now bear her name. She has become more than a historical figure. She is a cultural archetype, the woman who saw the future through the lens of logic. The debate will continue. Historians will continue to argue, how much did Ada actually write? Was she more poet than mathematician? Does the myth distract from the machine? But perhaps the most important question is, why does this myth matter so much to us? Because in every girl learning to code, in every young mind asking, what if machines could think? In every attempt to bridge art with science, Ada's myth gives permission to dream. A living legacy beyond the machine. Ada's story is not just about a machine that was never built. It's about what could be imagined before it was real, what could be said before it was accepted, what could be dreamed before it was possible. Whether or not she wrote every line of Note G, Ada Lovelace gave shape to the age of digital reason. She remains a beacon not because she solved every equation, but because she posed the questions that still challenge us. Part 9. Ada Lovelace's enduring influence on computer science, and digital culture. The DNA of digital logic. Long before Alan Turing or John von Neumann, Ada Lovelace envisioned something extraordinary. That a machine could go beyond arithmetic and become a general-purpose processor of symbols. Today, that idea is the very foundation of computer science. Software engineering is built on abstract instructions. Symbolic processing is key to artificial intelligence. Algorithmic thinking, Ada's true gift, powers every field from finance to medicine. She imagined the mental scaffolding of computation before hardware existed. Lovelace lives in the logic, gates, and loops of every machine. Turing, Babbage, and the echo of Ada. In 1936, Alan Turing wrote On Computable Numbers, formalizing the idea of a universal machine. His Turing machine could read, write, and follow instructions from a coded tape. Unwittingly or not, he followed a trail Ada had begun. Instruction sets, sequential commands, the idea that machines could act upon things other than numbers. Turing once remarked on the limitations of artificial intelligence. It is commonplace to say that a machine cannot create a symphony. In Note G, Ada had already echoed this. The analytical engine has no pretensions to originate anything. It can do whatever we know how to order it to perform. Two geniuses separated by a century, converging on the same question. Can machines ever truly think? Programming languages, inspired by Ada. In the 1972nd, the U.S. Department of Defense faced chaos. Hundreds of incompatible computer languages. They commissioned a new unified language. In 1980, it was launched. Its name, Ada, designed for safety, concurrency, and clarity, used in defense systems, air traffic control, and spacecraft, still taught today in engineering curricula. The name Ada wasn't just homage, it was a declaration. We remember the one who came first. Through code, her legacy becomes interactive. Artificial intelligence and Ada's question. Ada once asked, might machines one day compose elaborate music or even produce language? Today's AI composers, chatbots, and generative models say yes. From GPT to DAL, machines now generate music, text, art, voice, but Ada's caution still echoes. The analytical engine has no pretensions to originate anything. She saw that machines could simulate logic but not intention. Her questions guide today's debates in AI ethics. What is the line between intelligence and imitation? Can we encode creativity? Where does the machine end and the human begin? Ada Lovelace in educational curricula. Around the world, students now learn her name alongside Alan Turing, Grace Hopper, Charles Babbage, John von Neumann. Her story appears in computer science textbooks, philosophy courses on the mind, history of science classes. She represents the origin of software, the interplay of math and imagination, the right to belong in tech, regardless of gender. Schools hold Ada Lovelace Day, a celebration of women in STEM. She has become the North Star of inclusive innovation. Ada in popular culture and the public mind. Ada Lovelace's influence goes beyond academia and code. She has become a cultural icon. She appears in novels, e.g., The Difference Engine by Gibson and Sterling, comics, The Thrilling Adventures of Lovelace and Babbage, films, Conceiving Ada, 1997, video games, anime, documentaries. She is referenced in television shows, podcasts, memes, and even has an asteroid and Martian crater named after her. Like Einstein or Newton, she now belongs to both science and storytelling, digital feminism, and tech equity. For many, Ada is more than a historical figure. She is a symbol of reclamation. In a tech world still struggling with diversity, she represents the overlooked genius, the silenced voice, the erased contribution. Movements inspired by her include Ada Lovelace Day, second Tuesday of October, the Ada Initiative, supporting women in open tech, Ada's List, a global community of women in tech. She's become a rallying point for equity and innovation, reminding us that talent knows no gender. Philosophical reverberations in the digital age. Ada's notes go beyond code. They challenge us to think deeply. Can machines ever create meaning? Is thought only logic, or does it require soul? Is intuition programmable? Modern philosophers and AI theorists revisit her questions when probing consciousness, intentionality, digital ethics, the simulation of emotions. Ada wasn't just writing about a machine, she was meditating on humanity in the machine age. The immortal enchantress of numbers. From her room in 1843, filled with diagrams, ink, and dreams, Ada sent a message to the future. She could not know the extent to which her vision would unfold. Laptops, supercomputers, smartphones, artificial intelligence, quantum processing. Yet in each innovation, her spirit stirs. She believed the analytical engine would one day reveal the deep relationships of nature. That is what all of science, all of computing now pursues. Ada's eternal line of code. Ada Lovelace did not just write a program, she wrote a prophecy. She saw that the machine could become a medium of thought, that logic could touch language, music, and art, that women belonged in the temples of knowledge. Today, every time a coder types a line, trains a model, or dreams a new use for technology, they echo Ada in binary and silicon, in server farms and satellites, in apps and algorithms. Her code runs still. Part 10, Final Reflections. Ada Lovelace's legacy across centuries, the time traveler's vision. Imagine a woman born in 1815, dreaming of a machine that didn't exist to solve problems humanity hadn't yet imagined. She didn't invent the computer. She didn't write a full programming language, but she saw what was coming. She looked through the gears of the analytical engine and saw a world of music generated by numbers, ideas processed by algorithms, minds aided by mechanical logic. She was, quite literally, a time traveler of thought. A life measured by impact, not years. Ada Lovelace lived just 36 years. She battled illness all her life. She raised 3 children. She studied in secret. She translated a lecture and expanded it into a foundational theory. In that short time, she gave us the first published computer program, the earliest theory of symbolic computing, a poetic framework that united science and art. Her life was brief. Her light is permanent. The legacy of wonder and inquiry. Ada believed machines could do more than calculate. She saw them as partners in knowledge, tools for art, instruments of discovery. She wrote of a time when programmed thought would extend the human mind, not replace it. Imagination is the faculty of discovery, she wrote. It penetrates the unseen worlds around us. Every breakthrough in machine learning, virtual reality, quantum computing, and AI art echoes this very belief. What we still learn from Ada, her legacy teaches us many things. On curiosity, even in a world that discourages you, never stop asking, what if? On creativity, innovation is born not only from logic, but from imagination. On inclusion, no field belongs to one gender, class, or era. Science is for everyone. On vision, see not just what is, but what could be. Ada reminds us that invention begins long before the machine. It begins in mindset. Ada Lovelace Day and the movement she sparked. Every year, on the second Tuesday of October, the world celebrates Ada Lovelace Day. It's more than a remembrance, it's a movement. Talks are held. Young girls are mentored. Coders, engineers, scientists, all unite under her name. It's a global signal that women belong in every corner of STEM. Ada is not just a historical icon. She is a living cause. Monuments in silicon and story. Though Ada left behind no machine, no lab, and no university, she has monuments across the modern world. In bronze, statues in Oxford and London. In books, her story retold in novels, memoirs, children's tales, in classrooms. curricula that feature her as a pioneer in computer science, in technology, programming languages, AI tools, and cyber defense systems bearing her name in minds. The countless creators she inspires who whisper her name like a mantra, bridging science and art forever. Few people in history have bridged two worlds as Ada did. She was the daughter of Lord Byron, the great romantic poet, yet she also dreamed of mechanical intelligence. She believed math could have beauty, and machines could touch the soul. She called it the poetical science, a union of imagination and precision. That vision defines modern innovation. Today's most powerful creators, whether coders, designers, musicians, or engineers, are walking her path. The woman behind the code. So, who was Ada Lovelace, really? A curious child raised in a restrictive world, a woman who battled illness, societal norms, and doubt, a mother, a dreamer, a thinker, a visionary who glimpsed a future we are still building. She was not perfect, but she dared. She dared to write in symbols when others expected silence. She dared to ask questions science hadn't posed. She dared to see the invisible. Her legacy, line by line, her legacy isn't just in books or machines. It's in every line of code written with intention. It's in every student who says, "Yes, I can." It's in every question that challenges the status quo. Ada Lovelace did not change the world in her lifetime. She changed what the world would become. She didn't build the computer, but she gave it a soul. The final reflection, the machine she imagined was never built, but we did build it. Not with Babbage's gears, but with her vision. The future she foresaw is now our present, and her questions remain our challenge. In a universe filled with algorithms, Ada reminds us, the science of operations may ultimately become the science of all relations of order and sequence. That science of patterns, of logic, of language is what runs our world. And in that pattern, somewhere, always, you will find Ada,